Hey, what's up guys? It's Coach Remi here, helping you fix your back pain. Today we're going to talk about 3 common causes of back pain. And these 3 common causes are what I often see with the clients that I work with, or from people maybe commenting on my YouTube channel or email me or sending me a message. And it's usually kind of the same 3 common occurrences that are creating people's back issues and back injuries. So the first one is improper lifting technique. So a lot of people may not know how to lift with a proper neutral position, or they just don't do it and aren't aware of some of the consequences that can occur over time. So what you'll see, and there's a couple things to consider here, is that people will lift with a rounded back and they'll keep engaging in this motion. Now, as we factor in cycles of repeatedly doing that, and we factor in load, the load that we're lifting, this is going to increase the likelihood that a back issue will develop, specifically something like a disc herniation. And that's not something we want. Then on the flip side, another lifting error that people will engage in is hyperextension. So maybe they're lifting something here, so they have a rounded back, so they're already in a poor position, but then they'll finish their lift by going into extension. Or maybe they're lifting something and placing it up overhead, and they're engaging in hyperextension of the back. That can create a back issues, more specifically maybe some arthritic conditions can develop, the facet joints, a pars fracture, spondylolisthesis, which we don't want. So we need to get people, we need to teach them how to lift properly. And so in the case of the flexion, the discogenic issue, commonly it'll occur maybe when someone's shoveling snow or tying their shoe or just picking up a box off the ground. So I want to show you a couple tips here to lift with a good neutral back position. So when we're lifting something very light off the floor, and I have a 5-pound dumbbell here, and this could be maybe a golf ball, tennis ball, or anything like that. This is called the golfer's lift. And all we need to do is we can place our hand onto a wall or some sort of support, and we're just going to keep our chin down, back in a neutral position. One leg's going to be off the floor. We're just going to hinge back at the hips, keeping a nice neutral position. We'll reach down, grab our weight, pull our hips through, squeeze our butt. Now we got our weight, instead of rounding the back and picking it up. That position, the golfer's lift there, is going to spare the back of stress and keep us in a much safer position. Now, if we're lifting something heavier, like a 55-pound dumbbell here that I have on the seat, what we want to do is get nice and close to the weight, so the weight isn't far away from us, so that the axis or the lever is not long. I'm going to place more stress on the back. We want to stay nice and close to it, hinge back at the hips, chest nice and tall, neutral spine position. Grab the weight, grip it tight, pull the hips through, squeeze your butt, instead of lifting like this. So we have a nice neutral back position, and we can pick up a heavy object. Now, when it comes to more of our extension issues, key thing there is when you're picking something up here, so if we have the weight again, you just don't want to overextend. You just want to finish with the glute squeeze. Just don't overextend. That's the key thing to avoid. And so when we're maybe picking something up and trying to put it overhead, one tip you can do is, instead of going with a feet shoulder width apart, you can take a split stance, one leg back, one leg forward, lift it up, put it up. That's going to restrict or limit our chances of dropping into lumbar extension under load. So the split stance tends to work well with a lot of people. So improper lifting technique is our issue number 1, or our first common cause of back pain. Second is excessive static postures, such as excessive sitting, excessive standing, or excessive laying down in bed. So the reason why this is problematic, each one is a little bit different. So when we talk about excessive sitting, what will typically happen is, just using this seat as an example, is our muscles, as the longer we sit, our muscles will start to fatigue. And what will end up happening is that our back may start to get into a flatter back position, just because our muscles can't do their job to stabilize and hold us up in a neutral posture. So we continuously drop down, drop down, drop down. The longer we sit too, the continuous static load that builds up. And if someone has an existing back issue, this can increase the size of a disc bulge temporarily just for that position, and that can start to trigger back pain. And the longer they sit, they might start getting pain down their leg, and it'll keep irritating the neural tissue or the nerve. And that can be very problematic and something we want to avoid. So the key thing there is just you want to move around, change from a seated position to a standing position, maybe, or laying down every so often where you're not triggering your symptoms, and just work within your tolerance. So standing, the same principles would apply, just your back is typically in a better position, but over time, your back can start to take a lot of stress. Similar to what happens with sitting is those muscles may not be able to do their job as well because they're starting to fatigue just from holding that position for a long period of time. And also, an important thing I forgot to mention is that continuous static loading can also limit nutrients flowing to the low back, specifically to our discs, and that can be a problem for the overall disc health. In terms of laying down, it's a little bit of the opposite. So if you're laying down and say you're on your prescribed bed rest and you haven't got out of this position for hours beyond hours, what will end up happening is instead of the discs compressing and loading, it'll expand out and continuously build up fluid and continuously hydrate. And so what ends up happening is the disc builds up with so much pressure that they start putting a lot of stress on the end plates, and that starts to create some negative adaptations that can create a backache for someone just by laying in bed. So the key thing is you want to move throughout these postures and work with what feels best for you, and don't trigger your symptoms, because once you trigger your symptoms, you've already hit that threshold and now have triggered the pain, which you don't want, and you've damaged the tissue. So key thing is just to adjust those positions and do your work, adjust them as it suits you and feels best for you. So that's our second issue. Now moving on to our third and final common cause of back pain is poor exercise decisions. I can't stress enough how many people have hurt their back, with improper form, whether it's with a deadlift, squat, and I'm guilty of that myself, and that's how I developed my own back issues, on a poorly executed deadlift and poor exercise decisions on top of that. So first thing to talk about technique. When we talked about technique, kind of as the first common cause, but when we talk about the weight room, we need to make sure people are deadlifting with proper form, so hips back, shoulders are locked in, they're squeezing their butt forward. When they're squatting, they don't have that butt wink occurring. They're only squatting to a neutral position, where they're not engaging in that rounding of the back. And another thing like sit-ups, that's another poor exercise decision or choice, because that is the mechanism. If we continuously round our back like that, especially with load, if we're doing those crunch machines, that is the mechanism for creating a disc problem. So we need to make sure technique's on point. Exercise decisions, something like sit-up is not the best exercise choice. So things like planks, side planks, keeps our spine in a better position, would be a better alternative for developing the core. And then finally, we have to also look at the programming. Programming errors is another issue. So I do not like the combination of mixing deadlifts and burpees, because what will end up happening is burpees are a fatiguing exercise, and when you go do a very technical exercise like a deadlift, if you perform maybe 10, 15, 20 burpees or on a time, and then you're going to perform a high number of deadlifts, it's a recipe for disaster, because I'd say the deadlift is probably the most common exercise people throw their back out. And as you accumulate fatigue from a conditioning exercise, it's only a matter of time until technique will break down for that individual, especially mentally and physically, and eventually a back problem like a disc issue can develop over time. So we have to consider the technique, the exercise choices, what exercise we're doing, and also how we're programming. So that is the final common error that I see, or common cause of back pain that creates people's problems that I see in terms of people that message me or that I work with. So I hope this video helps give you some insight into some of the common causes of back pain out there, and some tips on how to address that, or address those issues and fix them. Okay guys, so if you have any questions or comments, please be sure to leave them below. And if you want to see more back pain tips or hear more back pain tips from me, be sure to subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Okay guys, all the best, take care, until next time.